Hello, you're watching World Talks on TVP World. My name is Sascha Fahrbach. For years, the UK stood as one of the primary destinations for Polish students, supported by capped tuition fees and freedom of movement within the EU. Today, EU undergraduate enrollment has fallen by 67%. Polish student numbers are down by around 80%, and annual fees reaching up to €36,000 are reshaping who can realistically access a British degree. Also at the same time as the 19th International Congress of Polish Student Associations convenes in Milan under the theme of Opening Horizons, Fostering Unity, we examine what this shift means for Poland's talent ecosystem and European academic mobility. We're now joined with Joanna Bagniewska, lecturer in environmental science, University of Oxford. Good to have you with us here on TVP World. Welcome.
Thank you very much for having me.
So let's start with the numbers here. As already mentioned, pretty much for some time now, those numbers, especially because of Brexit, are down, not just for EU students, but particularly Polish students. Is this now an irreversible decline, or how do you see this trend continue?
Well, I think it's, as you mentioned, very difficult for Polish students coming directly from Poland to access British education simply because of the fees. This is I don't think it's going to change over the next few years. However, that doesn't mean that there are no Polish students in British universities. It's just that they're Polish-British. So right now we're looking at students who hold dual citizenships, who often have been born in this country or who have arrived here when they were quite young. So it's a different demographic, yes. However, it depends what sort of question we're asking. So are we asking because we want to use Poles abroad as soft power and kind of treat them as ambassadors of Poland and then maybe entice them to come and live in Poland later on in life? Or is it looking sheerly at the numbers of Poles who have been educated in Poland up to high school level, up to their A levels, and then going abroad? So these are two different things. I think it might be really worth looking at the soft power of the second generation Poles in the UK, because there's quite a lot of them. However, it's also interesting to look at whether the second generation Poles do go to universities in the UK. Some of them will, but maybe there is a lot of untapped potential here too, because often there's this mental blockage of whether, especially from the parents' perspective, whether my kids are good enough to attend a British university, and if it's worth the money, should they instead go and study in Poland or in another EU country where it's much cheaper? Because this is a very, very valid dilemma. I mean, it is a lot of money. The fees are much smaller, 3 times smaller for home students, so students with a British citizenship. So this is another consideration. But yes, I think the numbers of Poles coming directly from Poland to study at UK universities is declining, and there's no change in that in the foreseeable future.
Mm-hmm. And as you also alluded to, I mean, it's soft power. I mean, I myself studied in the UK. I'm not Polish, but I met a lot of Poles who then, that path was sort of more clear to come here to Poland. So it's a bit of a loss, I'd say, personally. But anyway, I want to ask you also directly, if we're looking at other paths of students who now may not have that access because of the fees. I mean, that's quite expensive, not just for Poles, but for many other students across Europe.
Yeah.
Does that mean now that there's also a wider spectrum of universities in Poland? Are they now rising in the league tables? Where are other students now considering going besides now, if it's Warsaw, Krakow, is it Berlin? Where do you see that trend going?
I think what is the loss of British universities is a gain for many other European universities. Let's be honest, there's a lot of very high quality universities in Europe who would be all too happy to admit high quality Polish students for a teeny fraction of the price. So universities in the Netherlands, in Germany, in Sweden, where you can study in English if you want, are much more popular now. And to be honest, I can't blame the students. It's a very good opportunity. And also, I think it is an opportunity for universities in Poland because students who have been born in the UK but have a Polish citizenship would consider applying to Poland, especially for more expensive degrees such as medicine. So there has been an increased recruitment drive among Poles in Britain from Polish universities.
Mm-hmm. Also curious because, I mean, one of the things we've seen is just EU students and also looking at Polish students. I mean, they've in a way retreated from the UK, but there has to be also been a movement affected by, let's say, research-intensive elite universities, your own Oxford, LSE. Has Brexit and all these policies, has it narrowed access to those elite universities?
Well, the universities themselves, and I can only speak for Oxford here, are trying to make the university as accessible as possible. However, they have a very particular view of where this accessibility lies. So we have a lot of placement programs and support programs for students who are first-generation students, who are the first in their family to go to university, who are from economically less well-off backgrounds, who are maybe from ethnic minorities that are underrepresented. But these programs are targeted at British students. And this is something that I've always found, I understand where the university is coming from because it's a British institution and it should prioritize access in the British society. But at the same time, I was incredibly frustrated when even a few years back, there were a lot of support and mentoring programs coming from the alumni. I know of the Polish Society alumni who would provide summer schools for kids from Polish high school to come to Oxford and see what it's like to study here, to inspire them to apply, to then organize scholarships, etc., etc. And these efforts have not been recognized. And of course, right now, with the fees going up, they've kind of fizzled away because it's incredibly difficult to prompt someone, no matter how talented, to come to Oxford if they simply cannot afford it. So there are scholarship programs and there are access pathways. And for instance, Oxford offers a foundation year, so of people who might not feel as confident academically, but still show a lot of potential to come and just have a go at studying for a year and then come on to the undergraduate degree straight away. So there are options, but honestly, I don't think they are available for Polish citizens who don't hold a second citizenship. So it is a huge shame, in my opinion, because I love the diversity of the student body, but this is the time that we live in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but also in terms of access, we already covered a little bit the fees. I remember during my time we had about £1,000. Within about 2-3 years, it went to £3,500. Then suddenly jumped within less than 2 years. So very short span, high fees. But at the same time, let me ask you, with this everything moving around, is this a brain gain for Poland? Is this a brain circulation? Where do you see this shift on the bigger level? I mean, we already touched on it, but where does this leave Polish students, academia, etc.?
I think it's a great potential for Polish academia. I can see quite a few of my colleagues moving back to Poland, starting their own research groups, and actually having a pretty decent, making a decent living of it, which even 15 years ago was very rare, because Polish academia was thought of as this kind of stale and poor environment. And that has changed a lot with more grants becoming available, more opportunities, especially for younger researchers to move higher up. From that perspective, yes, it's becoming interesting. And I think overall, Polish universities are becoming more and more internationalized for all sorts of reasons. I mean, on one hand, you've got the Polish diaspora moving to Poland to study there. I'm avoiding the use of moving back to Poland because a lot of the time these 20-year-olds have never lived in Poland, but they are considering it as a good place to study simply because they know the language and the fees are much more bearable. But also, of course, because of wars, migrant groups coming into Poland and studying. So I think overall internationalization is a good thing because it allows the exchange of ideas, and it's something that's particularly useful in research when you need to be creative, and having a different perspective does help in it. So I do hope that Polish academia does recognize this as a positive and as something they can really capitalize on, rather than not being able to welcome the change and deal with it. What's interesting, so since 1989, there have been approximately, and that's a conservative estimate, 80,000 Polish students in UK universities. That I think that is quite a conservative estimate, but still a large number. But as you mentioned before, these alumni are often overrepresented in leadership positions, so be it in politics or in business or in the startup scene. And on one hand, you've got the education, which of course is very high quality, but on the other, I think what might be even more powerful is the networking effect. So you know the people, the peers who have studied with you, who might be then in a better position to help you out later in life, will be there for you, which is, I think it's overall a good thing to have a strong support network. It doesn't have to be abroad, it can be anywhere, but just building relationships is a great thing, and we should also think about that in the future.
Just really curious, one quick anecdote. I'm conscious of the time, just a sentence. We talk about Poles returning or looking elsewhere in Poland and Europe. What about UK students? Do you see an interest there more now, looking at academia and universities for those students in Poland?
Whether purely British students would study in Poland, is that what you're asking me?
Yes.
No second citizenship. Sometimes. So I know of a few colleagues who have sent their kids to study, particularly medicine, in different European countries, and sometimes they did study in Poland, but it's quite rare, mainly because Brits have not been investing much in language education for the past few years. A lot of programs are being cut, and languages are one of the first things to go, which is a shame, not just because they would be learning Polish in schools, because they normally wouldn't. It would probably be French or Spanish or German, but just that ability to be flexible and to think in another language encourages you to learn more languages, and it reduces that fear of the unknown, as you know. And Brits are, they're very hesitant when it comes to going and living in a country where English is not the first language, despite the fact that a lot of Poles, as we both know, speak English perfectly well.
But at the same time, more and more opportunities as well. Sorry to interrupt, for also English programs in Poland. So we'll see. We'll have to have this conversation another time and see where those trends go. Look, really interesting discussion. Thanks so much. That was our guest here, Joanna Bagniewska, lecturer from University of Oxford. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching. That concludes World Talks, but stay right here on TVP World for more. Goodbye.